how are you doing? I'm very excited because today we're doing my September wrap up. I was gonna say it feels like yesterday when I filmed my August wrap up, but to be fair, I was really late with that. I'm so sorry. So it could have been yesterday. But in September, I read 14 books, which amounts to 4,139 pages read, which is an average of 295.64 pages per book and 137.96 pages per day. So we did go down from last month, and I considered last month a slumpy month. This month I didn't. I don't know what's up with that. Then for format, we have 3 books I physically own, 1 ebook, 7 galleys from NetGalley, and 3 library books. For star rating, we are all over the place. We have 1 1 star, 3 2 stars, 5 3 stars, and 5 4 stars, 0 5s. It's depressing, I know, which amounts to an average rating of 3. 0.3 on the dot, which honestly I'm kind of proud of. Like that has never happened to me before. For age range, we have 2 middle grades, 4 YAs, 1 new adult, and 7 adult books. And for genre, we have a white mix. Last month I was a bit disappointed with my 3 genres. Now we have a white mix, feels more like me. And we have 4 contemporaries, 2 sci-fis, 2 mystery thrillers, 1 historical fiction, 2 graphic novels, 2 paranormals, and 1 comic. So the first book that I read this month is Nora Goes Off Script by Annabel Monaghan, which I give 3 5 stars to. This is one I kind of have conflicted thoughts on because there are elements to this that I really loved, but there are also elements to this that I really didn't like that much. Basically, I really loved Nora's personal journey throughout this book. I mean, character. I thought she was a very interesting character to follow. She had a lot of character progression to go through throughout the story, and I just really loved her journey. And then I also really loved kind of like her support system, like her friends, her family, her kids. I feel like they were all just great side characters, and I honestly had a lot of fun reading the scenes, and it was just them. But then this book is also a romance, and the romance was shit. It was not developed. I really didn't like the guy, and I was not invested at all. I did not care. And then next I read Annabel by Sierra Greer, which I give 2 5 stars to. This is a sci-fi book that is not typically my thing, but I've heard so many great things about it, especially from reviewers who also typically don't read this book. So I was quite excited for it, but for me it just missed the mark. I just felt like at a certain point this book, you feel like it's ramping up to something, and then it just like turns way in the other direction, and then it just gets so boring to me and so tedious, and I didn't really like it. And I was like, is this really the direction we're going in? Because it kept going that way and going and going, and I was a bit bored. And then at the very last second it turns back like very sharply on the road that we were originally on, but it feels so abrupt, so unearned, that like the ending just was so unsatisfying to me. Then next I read Well That Was Unexpected by Jessica Sutanto, which I give 2 5 stars to. This was just a really fun read. It's a YA contemporary romance. It's fake dating. It takes place in Indonesia, and I feel like this definitely is Jessica Sutanto's love letter to the country and like to the culture, and that's very clear throughout this entire book, and I feel like that's the strongest part of this book. Even though I had a lot of fun reading this, and I did not dislike my time at all, I also flew through it. I also just think that it's a very basic YA story, if that makes sense. Like I said, the thing that makes this book stand out is its setting and its focus on like the culture and everything, because it's so clear that so much love was poured into that aspect of this book. But when it comes to the romance, as much as I thought they were cute, I never really felt too much for them. And as 2 main characters as separate people, I thought their personal journeys, I thought they paralleled each other very nicely, and I also didn't think they were that bad, but I also feel like they were very typical for a YA contemporary. So to me, after like years and years of YA contemporary reading, this did not stand out to me anyway, which is why it's a 3 star. Like, I already forgotten so much about this book. Then next I read The Fiancé Dilemma by Elena, Armas, which I give 2 5 stars to, and I guess again I got from NetGalley. This was such a disappointment, because even though I didn't like the first book in the zoology, I actually was really excited for this one because the synopsis sounded right up my alley. I really liked the characters in this book in the previous book, so I was very excited to see their romance. But I thought this was such a bore. Nothing happens in this book. I didn't really like her main character either that much. I just wasn't that invested in her storyline. I thought the romance was a bit underdeveloped, if I say so myself. I thought they were cute, but they were a bit underdeveloped. I feel like I know almost nothing about the love interests because it was just so absent of a character. Not an absent of a character, just present in a lot of scenes. But I feel like oftentimes when I was like getting to know each other moments, he was very quick to turn the question back to her rather than like delving into like his own backstory and stuff. And therefore I feel like because it was all in our female main character's point of view. I feel like I didn't get to know him at all, and I don't know. Then next, I got The Examiner by Janice Hallett, which I gave 5 stars since I got it from Nangali. This is one of my most anticipated releases of the year because Janet Hallett just never does me one, and this was no exception. I really enjoyed this book. It's not a 5 star just because there are some things I want from the ending that were left out. I feel like just, I don't know, it can be open-ended, but I feel like this was a bit too open-ended. But for the rest, I really enjoyed this. It's another mixed media novel, and I really love how that was done in this book, especially because we follow characters who are like in a class together. So they have a lot of time they spend together that we don't get to see because we only get to see like emails and text messages and stuff like that. So it's very interesting to see their perspectives on situations that happened that we didn't get to see, but like to see their perspectives on it within different text messages and emails and stuff like that. I thought that was really interesting. This took some turns I did not expect. This honestly went in a direction I absolutely never saw coming, and I had such a blast reading it. Like, I always have so much fun with Janice Hallett books, just trying to puzzle things together, and I'm always shocked by what pieces end up being big parts, and then honestly, there's always this daily Janice Hallett books where I think like, why is this relevant? Like, this is such a small piece of the puzzle, I barely need it. And then by the end, it ends up being like the big thing that actually connects things together. I'm like, when did this happen? But it makes sense, and it's such a good read. I definitely highly recommend it. The next, I went to Woo and To Wed by Martha Waters, which I gave 4 5 stars as I got it from Nangali. This is a historical romance, and honestly, it's my biggest surprise of the month. I just thought I heard some mixed things about this series. It's like the first one I read in the series. It's also the last book in the series. I apologize for like their companion novels, so like it's not a big deal. But I generally had a really fun time reading this. I really liked our two main characters. I like their personal stories. I loved their romance. Like their chemistry just spat out the page so well. It was so done. A second chance. It was done in such an exquisite way. I feel like the reasons for them breaking up back in the day make a whole lot of sense. I loved getting to see them like fall for each other again, regain their trust in each other, and to just, I loved it. I loved seeing them together so much. I do think in the second half it drags a little bit, which is again why this kept it from being a 5 star for me. I feel like in the second half we kind of go in circles a little bit, where constantly we're talking about like the same issue over and over and over again. And I feel like the author just had this thing where she's like, okay, I need to keep these two people apart for a bit longer, but like didn't have any new reasons why they shouldn't be together. So we kept rehashing the same thing, which is again what kept us from being 5 star. But I read this so quickly. I devoured it. I had such a fun time reading it. Then next I read Primetime Romance by Kate Robb, which I gave it 5 stars because I got from Nangali. This is a book with a ridiculous premise that sounded right on my alley, so I was very excited for it, and I failed to deliver on it for me a little bit. It's another one that I have very mixed feelings on, very conflicting feelings on, because overall I do think this is a fun, lighthearted book, and I had a blast kind of like reading it. I kind of liked the lessons learned throughout this book. I think the ending was very satisfying. I flew through it. It was a very quick read, but on the other hand, I feel like it just failed in execution a little bit. I feel like the romance was just a bit underdeveloped. I wanted a little bit more from that. Basically in this book, a main character and a roommate get sucked into like her favorite TV show. So that's the setup for this book. And I feel like either you don't explain that at all, or you explain it really well. This went for somewhere in the middle, where it gave like a small explanation that just made this kind of feel a bit creepy and on borderline horror. And I feel like honestly with this premise you could make a great horror novel. I would love to see that. Just cut out the romance and the sappy bits. You could have had a great horror, because I genuinely felt like creeped out at times, but like it's not explained enough where I feel like the magic makes sense and how things work. Like none of that actually makes sense. It just, there was an explanation of why they were sucked into the story, and that just made things feel like creepy and eerie, and it didn't really fit with the vibe of the book. And I feel like I could explain it to you a bit more, but I feel like that would start to veer into spoiler territory. But that gave me such an ick that I don't know, I could never really fully love it. But I had such a debate with myself on what to rate this book, because my thoughts are all over the place. The next, I read Full Speed to a Crash Landing by Beth, which I gave it 5 stars since I got from Nangali. This is a sci-fi novella, and I honestly didn't hate this. I just feel like not a whole lot happened. This is very clearly set up for the rest of the series as the first in a trilogy, and I'm very excited to continue on with the trilogy, because I do think what is set up in this one is very interesting, and I'm very excited to see that explored a bit more. But there's just a lot of info dumping in this one book, like setting up the world, basically the politics of this world, because it's gonna be a very politics heavy story, I feel like. Then the characters, the relationship of the characters and like the dynamics and their backstory and everything, all of that was so had to be explained in this one novella, so it feels very bogged down with all of that and not a whole lot happened within it to like keep me going, which is why I give it a 2-star, because I really did not particularly enjoy this novella, but I am very, very excited because to continue on with it. Then next is The Pirate Princess by Luca Frigerio and Lorenza Pigliamosche, which I gave 1 of 5 stars to the gallery from the gallery. This is a graphic novel that I hated. I thought it was just so bad. I feel like it just jumped around from one thing to another, and I had such a hard time following along because of that, because I feel like at one point we were doing one thing and then you turn the page and they were doing something else, and I was just like, huh? How do we get here? I was so confused, and I did not enjoy it at all. It was just very poorly written. And then next I read How Could You by Ren Strapp, which I gave 4 to 5 stars to the gallery from that gallery. This one doesn't come out until December 17th, so you have to wait a little bit. But yeah, I did quite enjoy this one. This is another graphic novel. It is like a more new adult story about like finding yourself, and like it's messy. It has some shitty people in it, so be aware. Like from the early reviews that are already up, like the most complaints about this graphic novel so far is that it has some shitty main characters, and like yes, that's the point. So be prepared going into this book to dislike some people, because you will. But I honestly had so much fun reading this. It was not perfect for me. I feel like the ending was a bit abrupt, but overall I do recommend it. And the art style is also fantastic. It has 2 storylines, and at first I thought that was going to be very confusing in a graphic novel format, but ultimately it was just so clearly done and it wove into each other very nicely, so no complaints from me there. And next I read The Grandest Game with Jennifer Lynn Barnes, which I give 2 to 5 stars to. This was fine. I love the original The Inheritance games trilogy. Contrary to popular opinion, I actually think that original trilogy, the original 3 books, get better with each book. I know that's very unpopular. Most people think it gets worse with each book. I think it's get better with each book. But then The Bodice Hawthorne, which was the 4th book in that series that was added on later, I thought was not good. And then this one I was hopeful for, but also a bit careful about, because I wasn't sure what direction this was gonna go. And honestly, I do think I like it more than The Bodice Hawthorne, and I'm very excited to see the series continue, because it's technically a spin-off series, although I do not recommend reading this before reading the original series, because there's just a lot in there that you need for this, especially in The Bodice Hawthorne. Like The Bodice Hawthorne sets up this series a lot, which is a shame because I really did not like that book. But this one I feel like was dragged out a little bit too much. I feel like when it comes to characters like personal journeys, nothing happened in this book. But when it comes like the game, I do like what happens is we basically get like the first round of the game within this book, and there's a lot of different puzzles and people are split up, so you get to see different people approach the same puzzle in like different manners, and I thought that was really interesting. I thought the puzzles in this were actually pretty decent. I really liked them, and I also really liked the cast of characters. I thought they were great. I liked the setup we got for their own personal journeys, their own personal adventures they're going on. I thought that was interesting, but I feel like we started to like kind of like slowly move forward in those things where we are starting to, within their personal journeys, starting to like make a little bit of a progress, and the book just ends, and it it felt nothing. And next I read The Raven Boys by Maggie Stiefvater, which I give 4 out of 5 stars to. This was a reread. I originally read this in like 2016, so that's a while ago. I just never continued on with the series. I did also read book 2, we'll talk about that in a minute. I never like continued on with the series, and now it's been so long that I definitely needed to reread this for continuing, and I thought this is the season, so let's give it a read. And I still really enjoyed this. I originally gave this a 5 star, so I did dock up 1 star, just because I feel like this very much is the setup to a story, not like a full story on its own, if that makes sense. But it still felt, I just still really liked it. When it comes to characters, a group of characters, I thought they were very interesting as individuals, and I loved kind of seeing their own little dynamics, and then but their dynamics together is really where it shines, even this early on, where like, okay, the Raven boys know each other, but like Blue is still very new to the dynamic. Even the way she's like pulled into it immediately, and the boys' different dynamics with her and stuff like that, it immediately just feels like a found family, and they just fit together so well. And I love their different dynamics together, because even though they fit together so well, there's also obviously some tension between some of them sometimes. And I just really think Maggie Stiefvater, like in this book, just did such a great job immediately kind of like conveying all of these different emotions between these characters, these people. On top of that, we have Blue, also her own family plays a big part within his book as well, and I love their dynamics as well. I love kind of like the magic to this with the ley lines and the future telling. I think it's so interesting and it's so well crafted, and it has this like, it's not an in-depth magic system, but it doesn't need to be. It just like lays there, and it just like, I don't know, you immediately like sucked into it. It feels, it's so nice. The atmosphere to this is just sublime. I don't know how Maggie Stiefvater does this, but like from the first, like from the prologue even, you're just like completely like captured within this world, because she just knows how to write a scene so well, if that makes sense. Like you can picture everything so clearly that it feels like it's actually happening around you, and it just, I don't know, it was just a delightful read and I really loved it. I just feel like this book just has a lot to set up, and it does that so brilliantly, but because of that there is like not really a plot within this one so far, because you're just setting up all of the things that are to matter within the future. Then next I read Miss Poes by Rienties and Danny DeVos, which I give 4 out of 5 stars to. This is the 4th issue within this comic series from Camille, and I've been reading this because I love Camille, even though like this technically isn't aimed towards me, it's more towards like a younger audience. But I really loved the first issue, so I was like, ooh, yay, maybe, you know, it might not be the target demographic, but this will be a fun time. But then 2 and 3 really weren't a fun time. I really thought they were very badly written, so this was gonna be like my last chance with this series, and you saw my rating. I really enjoyed this one again. I just thought this was a lot of fun. I do think characters are a bit over dramatic at times, the way they respond to some of the things happening with this, and of course it moves quickly because, you know, it's short, and I feel like ideally I would like to be a little bit more breathing room in between things, but I can understand with like the format you have limits. But I did think this was much better written. I felt like it flowed just nicely. I feel like that was my issue with like previous issues like 2 and 3. It is that it didn't flow, it just jumped around a bit and it felt very abrupt at times. This one just flowed very nicely. It progressed in a natural manner. And then lastly, for today's wrap up, I have The Dream Thieves by Maggie Stiefvater, which I give 3 out of 5 stars to, and was a reread. This again is just a bit of a disappointment to me, because when I originally read it, I gave it a 5-star, and to like dunk it down to a 3, just, oh, it's so painful. But I think this book was so boring. That's such a shame, because I feel like what this book does, what it means for this world, and like the things that are introduced into this, and the reveals towards the end are like very interesting, very important things. And I do have to say, I really enjoyed the first like quarter of this book. I thought it just was a lot of fun. It set things up very interestingly. I was very excited to continue reading. And then the middle was just such a slog. It was so boring. Almost nothing happened in it. Our characters were split up for like most of it, which also just like, at least, well, like in book 1, when I was like in moments where not a whole lot happened, at least you had the gang together, and I was interested in that dynamics and what was going on there. We didn't even have that within the middle section of this book. And then in the end, the last quarter, so much happens. Like so much happens. This picks up the pace so much. There's like 2 big reveals, basically. Not really like reveals, because it's not like a shock moment. We kind of saw that was coming, but like 2 turning points, let's say, towards the end, and like they do play into each other, but I feel like the way it's executed just makes it feel like, you know, rushed in a way. Like it's not explained well enough. I don't understand it well enough, because it immediately has to like go into this other thing, and I don't know, I feel like if one of these 2 turning points was made a little bit earlier in the book, like about halfway through, that could have had its time to like breathe and like explain itself, and so we could work out what that means. And then when the second turning point comes and a first turning point has to like delve into that, it makes sense. At this point I was just like, huh? I was just a bit confused when it came to that. And yeah, that is my wrap up for September. I hope you enjoyed. If you read any of these books, let me know in the comments what you thought of them, and then hopefully I'll see you next time. Bye.